On a bright, clear morning, March 24th, 2015, the world seemed to be waking up to another ordinary day. The sun was rising, casting a golden hue over the airport, and the air was filled with the usual hustle and bustle of travelers, each with their own stories and destinations. Little did anyone know that this day would be etched into history for a tragic reason. Germanwings. Flight 9525 got ready to take off. The Airbus A320, a reliable workhorse of the skies, was being prepped for its journey from Barcelona, Spain, to Dusseldorf, Germany. The ground crew was busy ensuring everything was in order, from fueling the aircraft to loading the luggage. Germanwings, a budget airline owned by Lufthansa, was a common sight in European skies. Known for its affordability and efficiency, it catered to a wide range of passengers, from business travelers to holidaymakers. The airline had built a reputation for reliability, making it a popular choice for many. 144 passengers boarded the Airbus A320, all with different reasons for traveling. Each passenger carried with them a unique story, a purpose for their journey. Some were returning home while others were embarking on new adventures. The cabin was a microcosm of human experiences, filled with anticipation and excitement. Among the passengers were Spanish teenagers coming home from a school trip. Their laughter and chatter filled the air as they shared memories of their adventures, looking forward to reuniting with their families and friends. The trip had been a memorable one, and they were eager to share their stories. A young couple on a romantic vacation was also on board. They had spent days exploring the beautiful city of Barcelona, creating memories that would last a lifetime. Holding hands and exchanging smiles, they were the picture of happiness, looking forward to their future together. A German opera singer was returning home after a series of performances. The applause and admiration of audiences still echoed in their mind as they looked forward to a well-deserved rest. The life of a performer was demanding, but it was moments like these that made it all worthwhile. They were all together on this flight, each with their own hopes, dreams, and plans for the future, which would soon be tragically cut short. Their destination, Dusseldorf, Germany. The cabin was filled with a sense of purpose as each passenger settled into their seats, ready for the journey ahead. They had no idea their trip would end in a crash in the French Alps. The majestic mountains, often a symbol of beauty and tranquility, would become the site of an unimaginable tragedy. The serene landscape would soon be marred by the wreckage of the flight, a stark reminder of the fragility of life. The flight crew was Captain Patrick Sondheimer, a very experienced pilot, and co-pilot Andreas Lubitz. Captain Sondheimer had thousands of flight hours under his belt, a testament to his skill and dedication. Co-pilot Lubitz, though less experienced, was seen as a competent and reliable member of the crew. They seemed like any other flight crew, in charge of flying these people across the continent. Their professionalism and calm demeanor were reassuring to the passengers, who trusted them to ensure a safe and smooth journey. The crew's routine preparations were a well-practiced dance, each step taken with precision and care. Their voices, calm and professional, made passengers feel safe as the plane moved to the runway. The familiar announcements, the safety instructions, and the final checks were all part of the pre-flight ritual that passengers had come to expect. It was a moment of calm before the excitement of takeoff. Germanwings Flight 9525 was in the air, climbing higher and higher, the engines roaring as the plane ascended into the clear blue sky. The passengers looked out of the windows, watching the ground fall away and the horizon expand. It was a moment of awe and wonder, a reminder of the marvels of modern aviation, a normal flight turning into a terrible tragedy. In a matter of minutes, the routine journey would take a devastating turn, leaving a trail of heartbreak and loss. The events that unfolded would shock the world and leave an indelible mark on the history of aviation. The beginning of the flight was normal. Passengers sat down, the sound of the engines like a quiet song. People were laughing and talking. Some read books, others thought about where they were going. The flight attendants started serving drinks and snacks, their smiles making the plane feel normal. Captain Sondheimer, with his calming voice, made the usual announcements. He talked about clear skies and good winds, promising a smooth and on-time arrival. His words made everything seem normal, very different from the horror that was about to happen. For now, the passengers were relaxed, not knowing the terrible thing that was about to happen. The world outside, a beautiful view of clouds and sunlight, gave no sign of the darkness to come. "45 minutes into the flight, something normal turned scary. The passengers were relaxed, some reading books, others watching movies, and a few chatting with their neighbors. The hum of the engines was a comforting background noise, a reminder that they were safely cruising at 38,000 feet. The captain left the cockpit, leaving Lubitz alone. It was a routine procedure, something that happened on almost every flight. The captain needed a short break, perhaps to use the restroom or stretch his legs. This was a normal thing to do, so pilots can take a short break on long flights. The captain walked down the aisle, nodding to a flight attendant who smiled back. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary. But when the cockpit door closed, something felt wrong. There was an almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere, a subtle tension that went unnoticed by the passengers but was felt by the crew. The click wasn't just the sound of a door closing, it was the sound of fate changing the passengers' lives forever. Minutes passed. The captain, now refreshed, made his way back to the cockpit, unaware of the impending crisis. The captain came back and asked to go back into the cockpit. Silence. He waited for a response, expecting to hear the familiar sound of the door unlocking, but there was nothing. He knocked again, harder this time. The silence was deafening. Panic began to set in as he realized something was terribly wrong. He pounded on the door, shouting for Lubitz to let him in. The passengers, not knowing about the silent problem in the cockpit, kept talking and laughing, not knowing about the terrible thing that was about to happen. They were blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding just a few feet away. The captain's voice, now scared, tried to get past the automatic door lock, but it didn't work. He shouted, banged on the door, and even tried to use the emergency code. But the door remained firmly shut. The cockpit door, made to stop terrorists, had become a wall. A wall that separated the captain from his co-pilot and the passengers from their fate. The reinforced door designed to protect was now a barrier to safety. The captain's heart raced as he realized the gravity of the situation. He knew that every second counted, but he was powerless to act. The passengers continued their conversations, oblivious to the impending disaster. The flight attendants exchanged worried glances, sensing that something was amiss. The tension in the air grew thicker with each passing moment. The captain's desperate attempts to regain control of the cockpit were in vain. The door, which had been their shield, was now their prison. The fate of everyone on board was sealed, and there was nothing anyone could do to change it. The first sign of trouble was the plane slowly starting to go down. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye. The aircraft, a Germanwings Airbus A320, had been cruising smoothly at 38,000 feet. Passengers were relaxed, some napping, others engrossed in their books or movies. The cabin was filled with the usual hum of conversation and the occasional clink of a drink cart, but then, the plane began a gradual descent, unnoticed by most on board. The change in altitude was hard to notice at first, a small tilt that seemed normal. The pilots often make minor adjustments to the flight path, and a slight descent can be part of a routine maneuver. However, this time the descent continued. The plane's nose dipped ever so slightly and the horizon outside the windows began to shift. Passengers felt a faint pressure in their ears, a sign that the plane was losing altitude. But as the minutes passed and the plane kept going down, people started to feel uneasy. The initial calm gave way to a growing sense of discomfort. Some passengers glanced out the windows, noticing the changing landscape below. The once distant mountains seemed to be getting closer. Flight attendants, trained to maintain composure, began to exchange worried glances. They moved through the cabin, checking on passengers, their smiles strained. Whispers went through the rows, replacing the earlier laughter. Conversations turned to hushed tones as passengers speculated about what might be happening. "Is this normal?" someone asked. "Are we supposed to be descending now?" another wondered. The uncertainty was palpable and the once lively cabin grew quiet and tense. The sense of unease spread like a ripple through the rows of seats. Passengers looked at each other nervously, wondering what was happening. The usual distractions of in-flight entertainment and snacks no longer held their attention. Eyes darted around the cabin, seeking reassurance from fellow travelers. Some passengers clutched their armrests while others fidgeted with their seatbelts. The atmosphere was thick with anxiety, and the sense of foreboding grew stronger with each passing minute. Outside, the plane's path looked scary on the radar screens of air traffic control. Controllers watched in alarm as the aircraft deviated from its planned route. The descent was not part of the flight plan, and the sudden change in altitude raised red flags. Communication attempts with the cockpit went unanswered, adding to the growing concern. The radar screens displayed a troubling picture, and the controllers knew they were witnessing a potential crisis. Germanwings Flight 9525 was going down, leaving its planned route. The deviation was not just a minor course correction, it was a significant and alarming change. The plane's descent rate increased, and the cockpit alarms began to sound. The once routine flight had taken a dangerous turn, and the situation was becoming increasingly dire. The aircraft was now on a collision course with the rugged terrain below. People tried to contact the cockpit, but there was only silence except for the sound of the co-pilot's breathing, heard on the cockpit voice recorder. The eerie silence from the cockpit was unsettling. Passengers pressed the call buttons, hoping for an explanation or reassurance, but none came. The flight attendants, too, were met with no response when they tried to reach the pilots. The only sound that came through the cockpit voice recorder was the steady, rhythmic breathing of the co-pilot, a haunting reminder of the human presence behind the controls. The scary truth that something was terribly wrong started to hit the passengers. The realization dawned slowly but surely. Faces turned pale and eyes widened in fear. The initial confusion gave way to a stark and terrifying reality. The plane was in trouble and there was nothing they could do. The sense of helplessness was overwhelming and the atmosphere in the cabin grew increasingly tense. The fear was now unmistakable, etched into the faces of everyone on board. Real fear filled their hearts. The gravity of the situation was undeniable. Passengers clung to each other, seeking comfort in the presence of loved ones. Tears welled up in eyes and hands trembled. The once mundane flight had transformed into a nightmare, and the fear was all-consuming. The realization that their lives were in imminent danger was a heavy burden to bear, and the emotional toll was evident in every face. Some prayed, holding religious items and whispering to God. In moments of extreme fear, many turned to their faith for solace. Passengers clutched rosaries, prayer beads, and other religious items, seeking comfort in their beliefs. Heads bowed in silent prayer, lips moved in whispered supplications. The cabin, once filled with casual chatter, was now a place of solemn reflection and desperate hope. The prayers were a testament to the human spirit's resilience in the face of overwhelming fear. Others quickly tried to contact family and friends, but their messages and calls couldn't get through. The urge to reach out to loved ones was strong. Passengers pulled out their phones, frantically typing messages and dialing numbers, but the altitude and speed of the descent made it difficult for signals to connect. The frustration of failed attempts added to the sense of panic. The need to say goodbye, to hear a familiar voice, was a powerful and heartbreaking impulse. The normal flight had become a terrifying experience, and the air was filled with fear. The transformation was complete. The once routine journey had turned into a harrowing ordeal. Flight attendants did their best to maintain order, but their own fear was evident. The cabin was a sea of anxious faces, each person grappling with their own thoughts and fears. The sense of impending doom was inescapable and the atmosphere was thick with tension. The passengers of Germanwings Flight 9525 were facing the unknown, and the outcome was far from certain.